such a funny scene that really shows us how amazing this movie is gonna be. Despicable Me 4 is the 4th installment of the amazing Despicable Me franchise, and without a doubt, it's one of the best movies of the franchise and really shows us that Illumination is still Illumination Studios. This is because, as in the previous movies, we see a brand new villain called Maxime, a villain that, unlike all the previous villains we've seen before like Vector or Brat, doesn't care about Gru's family as opposed to the other villains that kind of did, because they only went against Gru instead of his family. But this time, this new villain called Maxime is really gonna threaten the new family of Gru, because now, as we've seen in the movie, Gru has a new baby that doesn't really get along with him that much, until the end of the movie, of course, where he really shows him how much he loves him, and this makes the baby come back to his senses and go against Maxime, who really turned him into one of his cockroaches. Now, we have seen that without a doubt, Despicable Me 4 is an amazing movie, but as with any amazing animated movie out there are a lot of amazing details hidden all over the movie that you have to really take a close look at for you to see, and Despicable Me 4 is not an exception. You have a lot of details that you probably missed, and I'm really gonna show them to you guys in this video. Some of these details are incredibly interesting because they have to do with other villains that we have seen in previous movies, and also they give us a little bit of a background to know more about Despicable Me 4 in a completely different way that we really aren't shown in the movie. So without further ado, let's take a look at all the amazing details that you didn't notice in Despicable Me 4. So let's go, guys. At the beginning of the movie, we see the scene where Gru is heading and driving towards the AVL offices because he's supposedly gonna have a meeting with these guys. But then, when he gets there, he finds Maxime, the villain that he's really gonna be against years later, and we see the whole scene and the whole background and the animosity between these guys develop right here. But if we back it up a little bit and we go back to the scene where Gru tells the minions to really behave in this scene and watch out for any dangers, we see a funny shot where we see them wearing black suits and glasses like these. Well, this is a reference to the fictional character and main antagonist of the Matrix franchise, Agent Smith. The character was portrayed by Hugo Weaving in the first trilogy of the films, and he did an incredible job. Him and Morpheus are definitely one of the most iconic characters of the franchise, and till this day his legacy goes on. And we see it, of course, in this scene of the minions, where the minions are trying to really look like this guy, to look a little bit more defiant and feared in a way to look like bodyguards of Gru. But actually the opposite happens and they end up looking even cuter, because at the end of the day, whatever they do, they're minions. Once Gru shows up to the door of the palace of the AVL, we actually realize that this is not an actual meeting, but Gru is trying to catch Maxime, a villain that is wanted by the AVL, and he's gonna be there in that ceremony where they're gonna be giving out awards. Now, here Gru tells the minions to watch out for Maxime and to be aware at all costs. Of course, the first thing they do when they walk into the ceremony is get distracted with jelly, and they start playing with it. Gru, seeing that the minions are gone, like always, he continues on. But if we go back to the scene where Gru walks in, we can see a villain right here that is wearing a Jason mask. Well, we've actually seen this villain before in the Despicable Me franchise in the Minions 2 movie, The Rise of Gru. Released in 2022, The Rise of Gru was such an amazing movie that really showed us the beginnings of Gru and how Gru came to meet the minions in the first place. Now, in this movie, there is a scene where Gru wants to present himself to the Vicious Six, and in this scene, we see the same villain that we see in Despicable Me 4 in the waiting seats, waiting to get called by the Vicious Six. And like I said before, this same villain is a reference to Jason. Now, a little bit after this scene, we see a shot of Gru getting a little bit angry because of something that happened. And right here, in the right side of the shot, we see another villain that was also waiting in the seat in Minions: The Rise of Gru. The most interesting part about all of this is that, like Scarlet Overkill, these guys don't seem to age at all, because apparently this movie takes place when Gru is young, and now Gru is huge, but the guys are still the same. But it's a funny reference to the movie. Then, a little bit after this scene, we see that all of a sudden Maxime comes out and presents himself to Gru. And as we see in the movie, he really is a child trapped in a man's body, and he tries to humiliate Gru along with his girlfriend Valentina inside the award show, basically telling him things like he's not the best villain ever and he's way better than him and all of these things. Of course, these things really make Gru angry and eventually fuel the reason why he becomes so obsessed with trapping Maxime and calls the AVL agents to trap him and send him to prison, which is eventually how the movie starts and how the plot begins, which after this, of course, Maxime escapes prison. Now, Now, in one of the scenes when Maxime presents himself for the first time to Gru, and we see him in the movie for the first time, we actually see another character behind him wearing a mask. Well, this villain right here is wearing a costume that is a complete reference to Batman. Batman is a superhero who appears in the American comic books published by DC Comics in the beginnings of 1939. Ever since the first time he appeared, he became one of the most popular superheroes to ever exist. And today, everyone knows the name of the superhero. Because of this, Illumination Studios wanted to throw a little bit of a shot to this character by showing us a villain that we apparently have never seen before wearing a Batman costume. But it doesn't end here. Right after this, we see another shot where there is a couple more villains looking shocked at what's going on. And within the crowd of supervillains, we can see one that is pretty peculiar. This same villain right here has appeared in many other Despicable Me movies. He's a reference to the creature from the Black Lagoon. Released in 1954, it was an American movie produced by William Allen and directed by Jack Arnold. It was a massive success, making over $1.3 million in the box office of that era. In the movie, we see that the main characters are going after a creature that's called the Black Lagoon creature. And if we look at him, he looks exactly like this villain here in Despicable Me 4. Later into the movie, Gru meets Poppy. Poppy is the daughter of one of the neighbors that Gru has right now ever since he moved into the AVL headquarters. This Poppy girl makes Gru's life a little bit more difficult than ever because in the movie, she tells him that she is gonna reveal to everyone who he really is, and she wanted to be the same exact villain that Gru once was. And she told him that in exchange for teaching her how to become a villain, she was not gonna tell anybody anything, and she was gonna keep the secret. Of course, Gru says no to this, but at the end of the day, he feels scared for his family and accepts the deal. Now, in one of the scenes of the movie with Poppy, we see a scene where she is in the treehouse and she is observing Gru with her camera tree, and in this shot, we can see a lot of amazing details that you definitely missed while watching the movie. If we look at the bottom, right on top of the machine board, we can see a small figurine of Wild Knuckles, the legendary fighter who was the former leader of the original Vicious Six. Then, if we look at the left side of the shot, we see Belle Bottom, the disco diva supervillain who took Wild Knuckles' place as the leader in the Minions 2 movie. And then we see the funny Svenjens, the Swedish roller skating champion with the blonde hair and the blonde mustache that was really popular and iconic in the whole movie of The Rise of Gru. Going back to Poppy, there is a scene in the Despicable Me 4 movie where we see that Poppy is basically doing the same exact trick that she did before, trying to convince Gru to become a villain again, or at least help her to become the villain. And then Gru asks her what she wants, and she wants the Badger from the School of Villains. But if we go back in the scene when Gru and Poppy are talking in her room, we see that she has a poster right in the background that says the word butter. And this is actually the name of a song of the group BTS. But most importantly, the logo that she has right there, butter, is the same exact one as the one we see in the BTS music video. If we put them together, we see that the reference is way more than obvious. So not only we know that Poppy wants to be a villain, but we also know that she's a fan of BTS.